When does sport get serious? Different people will have different answers, but here's one. It's serious when prime ministers weigh in, and it's reached that stage in Australia. There is a standoff between a cricketer and the ICC, that's the International Cricket Council. Let me introduce the cricketer first. Usman Khawaja. He plays for the Australian side. Last week, he was part of a test match between Australia and Pakistan. Khawaja turned up like this, with a black armband. So the ICC was not happy. They charged him with violating its clothing regulations. Now, the black armband is not new. Many teams have worn it before. But there are rules around it. A, you have to take prior permission, which Khawaja did not. And B, it cannot be for a political, religious or racial cause. Normally, armbands are worn under different circumstances, like if a former player passes away or if a natural disaster has struck. Non-political and non-controversial events. Did Khawaja have a similar reason? He says he did.
For me personally, dealing with the ICC, I don't think being reprimanded for wearing a black armband, which the ICC asked me on day 2 what it was for. I told it was for a personal bereavement. I never ever stated it was for anything else.
So Khawaja says it was a personal loss. Then why isn't the ICC believing him? Because of what happened before the match. Khawaja turned up to training wearing these shoes. It said, "All lives matter." It was a reference to the war in Gaza. Khawaja has spoken openly about it. He has criticized the killing of innocent children and civilians. But again, the cricket bosses were not happy. They asked him to wear the shoe, not wear the shoe rather. Khawaja agreed, but he made his stand clear.
I'm not taking sides. Human life to me is equal. One Jewish life is equal to one Muslim life, is equal to one Hindu life, and so on. I'm just speaking up for those who don't have a voice. The ICC have told me that I can't wear my shoes on field because they believe it's a political statement under their guidelines. I don't believe it is so. It's a humanitarian appeal. I will respect their view and decision, but I will fight it and seek to gain approval.
Days later, he turned up with black armbands. Just him, not his teammates, which is why the ICC was not happy. They believe Khawaja was making a political statement, maybe expressing support for Gaza. If the charges hold, he will get a formal warning. If he keeps doing it, he will be fined. Khawaja says he won't, but the armband will be gone by the next match. What do his teammates think about this? Most of them are in support, including Captain Pat Cummins. He said, "All lives matter" is a non-controversial statement. Even Australia's Prime Minister agrees.
I think that Usman Khawaja is a great Australian cricketer, and that the position that he put forward is one that I think is pretty uncontroversial. One that all lives are equal is a sentiment that I think is uncontroversial.
It's a tough call, really. Athletes have a lot of power and influence. You want them to champion important causes. But which causes are political? Which ones are non-controversial? And should there be a blanket ban on political expression? I'm afraid it's not a yes or no question. And I'll explain why I say this. Football players in Europe are a good case study. Like Yusuf Attal. He was suspended by Nice for sharing an anti-Semitic message. Karim Benzema is another example. He shared a message in support of Gaza. The French Interior Minister accused him of ties with the Muslim Brotherhood. Clearly an overreaction. My point is, players tend to have opinions, like all people do. And sometimes these opinions divide and enrage people, which is why rules are important. Should political statements be allowed in sports or not? Just consider the Khawaja case. His shoe said, "All lives matter." In this context, it is non-controversial. But what about in the US? You may remember the Black Lives Matter movement in the US. Back then, neo-Nazis came up with their own slogan, "All lives matter." So in that context, it is controversial. It was equivalent to denying racism. Also, assume that you allow political messages in sports. What if someone decides to promote vaccine hesitancy or conspiracy theories? So it could be a slippery slope. Supporting bodies or sporting bodies must also take some of the blame here. You cannot pick and choose your causes. That seems to be the problem now. Taking the knee is common before every football match. Again, it's a protest against racism. Most footballing bodies promote it. In fact, even referees take the knee before matches. If that is fine, why is supporting Palestine not fine? Do you see the problem here? You can't say one cause is fine and the other is not. As for the players, the message is quite simple. Rules are there for a reason. If you don't agree, take the official route. But flouting them does not help anyone. I'm sure hundreds of kids look up to Khawaja. Is he telling them breaking rules is fine if your cause is right? I hope not. We're not saying athletes should be robots without opinions. But there's a time and place for it. You can release messages on social media or hold a press conference. No sporting body will prevent that, hopefully. But on the field, it's their rules.